on our site and used sometimes in the museum. You can see one looks a bit like a JCB. That's because basically it is. They call it a JCab, and it's another one of those armoured or unarmoured vehicles that can be armoured if it goes into combat. Some of these did have add-on armour kits when they went out to Afghanistan and Iraq. And it's a useful load-carrying vehicle, can manoeuvre things around, pick up pallets, take things left, right and centre, air portable, very good, four-wheel drive, just the sort of basic thing the military can use in lots of different situations. The other whopping great big bulldozer there, it looks like a bulldozer on steroids, that's something called a Terex. Technical name, Terex 8230B Tractor. And the military has used these down at places like Marchwood, the military port just by Southampton, to offload dead vehicles from ships and manoeuvre them around. This particular one used to work up on the camp, up in the repair organisation that's now called Babcock's up there, that repairs the Army's tanks. It's actually had rubber track pads fitted so it doesn't chew up the floor too much, and that one we use to actually manoeuvre tanks into tight spaces in the museum. Now the procession of vehicles coming on, the first vehicle coming on is one that looks like one of the armoured personnel carriers of the museum, or you'll see around in the museum and see on the displays later. It's something called FV434. That's armoured fighting vehicle, and it was part of the 4-3 family. A lot of different variants built on this chassis. And the idea of this one, its primary role was to be able to change things like Chieftain power packs, the L60 engine that was notoriously unreliable. You could fit an engine in the back there, and that crane was able to actually lift it and put it into place. Unfortunately, when the Challenger series of tanks came along, the crane's not powerful enough to lift that, so we have a new vehicle. Behind the 434, that's something called a Foden Recovery truck. And the Foden, over 300 were built for the British Army, and again this particular Foden spent most of its service life based down the road at Lulworth, driven around by a chap called Pete Galley. So if any of the Army vehicles that it could recover, wouldn't recover a big tank, but would recover lighter vehicles like Scimitars, Scorpion, and soft-steer wheeled vehicles, that's what would have gone out, picked it up and towed it back. And you've got on the back there actually a crane that can be used remotely, so you actually have a little cable, and so you can do everything away from the vehicle, which is very useful obviously as well for recovering different things so you don't put yourself in danger. Behind that, an MAN truck, that's what the British Army are now using as light recovery. Manning the arm that truck's called. The British Army's got a big contract with a man to the German truck company, and that vehicle fitted with a whopping great Chieftain crane on the back. Again, it's one of those vehicles very, very useful. You see around the road covering anything light. towards it. And again, there's actually crew spaces inside the vehicle for an extra couple of people, so you can actually shelter the vehicle that is recovering crews inside. And again, you can see a high-ab crane on the back there for lifting engine packs off the rear and into another vehicle. Third armoured vehicle with its lights flashing, that's a Challenger armoured repair and recovery vehicle. And that came into service with the Challenger family. And again, that one's different in the sense it's got a much more modern Perkins diesel engine in. Similar shape, similar crew layout. You've got the commander, you can see him on the cupola on the top. Drivers in the front, and there's again more crew space inside to shelter a recovered crew. That whopping great dozer blade on the front there, and also acts again as a ground anchor. And that also on the back there, you've got this whopping great crane that again can lift about 6.5 tons, so very easily can do an engine pack, do other key components out in the field. One of those assets that the military have to protect very carefully. These vehicles, and you'll see later this morning in the British Army display, things such as your bridge layers, they can be key to your advance or your combat capability, so you have to husband them carefully. These are assets the Army doesn't have many of, so they're looked after very, very carefully in service, and certainly in the front line. The Challenger recovery vehicle, technical name is CARRV, which is Challenger Armoured Repair and Recovery Vehicle. And you can see there, we're actually very lucky here having one at the Tank Museum, because the downsizing of the modern Army's tank fleet means that there was some CARRV spare, so we managed to grab one. And all of the armoured recovery vehicles, later in Army trade. A lot of the vehicles here are very old. There's a good chance something might go wrong, something may decide to fail. You'll see the appropriate one of these vehicles come out and try and recover it. So you can probably see some real recovery in live action. So those again, vehicles progressing around. You can see in the front there, the 434. Crew of 3, normally crewed by Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers would be in that. The Foden behind it, big beefy looking vehicle, now replaced in service, it's gone out of service with the man truck that's gone on behind it. Lots of Fodens of course were sold on, they're still used by recovery companies all over the country, and some were sold on out the Army to other armies around the world. Another one of those trucks that looks the business, looks like it knows what it's doing. Absolute perfect shape for its role. And the Man Series truck coming on, part of a family of man trucks, and again, if this goes into a combat situation, there are armour packs and ways to protect the vehicle from light armour going to a war zone. Centurion ARV, again a classic excellent Centurion, followed by the multi-fuel engine, the L60 engine, Chieftain armoured recovery vehicle, and then last of all the CARRV, the later generation vehicle that's still in service, and you'll see another one looking slightly different with all the extra armour on that will be coming out a little bit later on with the Army display. And again, it's worth pointing that out, that a lot of vehicles that the Army trains with, they look different to when they go into service. And you'll notice, especially with that CARRV, this one looks a bit naked compared to the in-service Army one that you'll see a bit later on, where they've got what they call entry standard. That means it's got all the extra armour placed on the side of it, extra reactive armour as protection should it be going into a combat zone. And the Army looks at its vehicles nowadays in a very much more modular manner, in the sense of, depending on the threat levels it's going to operate in, that's when they decide how much extra armour or what the key components they think are going to be needed to be added to the vehicles when it goes on to fight. So as I mentioned earlier, these are some of the vehicles that you may well see around our site at different times. We thought it was about the time we gave them a bit of an airing so you could actually see them in operation. Now, as the recovery vehicles head off, there'll be a short break, a very short break, because we'll be then at 11 o'clock, we'll be doing our tank pull challenge, and that's where we've got a number of military